Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Talking Devils, the leading Manchester United. Oh, I've done it again. I've got to say, the leading independent Manchester United podcast, and every single week I balls it up. This is the United Before Fergie podcast. If you're watching this live, leave a comment, like, subscribe, etc. If you're watching this on the repeat or the catch up, hi. Don't know why I'm waving. You probably can't see me, but it doesn't matter. Again, leave comments and stuff. If you're listening to on the audio podcast after the show has run, then do exactly the same there. Leave your views and your comments and your likes and whatnot. I don't know how it works these days, all this modern technology. But anyway, I'm Paul. I'm your host for this evening, and I'm joined by Ian, Ian Street, looking very, very professional there.
Hello.
That's incredibly professional. And Mr. Memorabilia Extraordinaire himself, Paul English, who is, if you follow him on Twitter, you will notice he's a walking encyclopedia of the history of United, and it's a pleasure to have you. You are Paul.
It's all there. It's all there.
It's all there. And Ian, you've got also an impressive collection of United memorabilia as well.
I'm sworn to secrecy, obviously, of anything after from Fergie and after, so I won't be mentioning any of that. But I've got some interesting stuff from the Busby Braves right the way through. In fact, you might see a cap behind me. Can you see that England cap? That's Tommy Taylor's England cap from 1957. There you go.
Nice. Now the Busby Babes has to be a podcast at some point, and we will get onto that. Tonight's topic is Steve Coppell. Still massively popular among United fans, but he doesn't get a lot of airtime, and I don't know why. I was googling a little bit earlier on about players who were born in Liverpool that went on to play for United, and the only three that I can think of are Wayne Rooney is the obvious one, I think, John Gibman, and Steve Coppell. Are there any more? I can't think of any more that immediately jump out at me. That players born in Liverpool that went on to be a success at United. I'm sure there are lots throughout the history, but
they're just keeping it quiet.
Can you blame them? But yeah, it's Steve Coppell is one of those players that United fans, particularly of the Docks era, so the sort of mid-late 70s and the early 80s, which obviously wasn't Doherty, that was another couple of managers there. But he really seems to have caught the imagination, and it's underrated is a word that you hear an awful lot of. And although amongst United fans of that era, he certainly wasn't, but I think he has that underrated feeling amongst fans of other clubs. Guys, any idea why you think that is? When he was such a tremendous guy?
I completely agree with you that, whenever we talk about famous number sevens at Manchester United, that for me there's actually two that are missed out, and we talk about Morgan, but everybody seems to think that Best played at number 7, whereas actually Best played at 11 most of the time, and Morgan played at 7. And I think when people think about the sevens, they always think about Best, and I think they tend to leave Morgan out to an extent. But then, as you say, you've got Coppell. Now, I think maybe one of the reasons may have been that when he first came to the club, sorry, I'm digressing a little bit here, but I was thinking about Morgan and Coppell. My first match at Old Trafford was in March of 1975, 2 weeks after Steve Coppell had signed for United. And I could feel a bit of an undercurrent there because a big fan favourite in Willie Morgan had suddenly lost his place. That didn't last long, I've got to say. That didn't last long. And I can remember because I was standing down in the scoreboard paddock, and I can remember Coppell taking the corners, and there was a lot of people geeing him on, saying, "Come on, son, let's see what you can do," and all of that sort of thing. But I do think maybe the start with the fact that he did replace a huge favourite in Morgan. And of course, Morgan had fallen out with Doherty by this point. So, Morgan was being shown the door. So I think there was quite an undercurrent of a lot of old fans that, weren't sure about him. But I think one of the things for me is that under Doherty, he was an out-and-out winger. We had the two wingers, Hill, Coppell, and that changed, I think, once Sexton came on board. And I'm not sure whether that changed the fans' perception of him as a number 7.
Mm.
You understand what I'm saying? Is that although he still had that number on his back,
could you try again?
Although he had the number on his back, I don't think.
Not sure I understand.
Siri, shut up.
Siri doesn't understand about Steve Coppell, obviously.
I think although he had the number 7 on his back, he stopped playing as an out-and-out winger under Sexton and became a more what I would call a left-sided midfielder. Obviously, very, very. I keep saying left-sided. He was right-sided.
Paul, I was a year later than you, as we spoke before we came on, in terms of seeing my first game at Old Trafford, which was against Middlesbrough. We won 2-0, and Pancho Pearson scored, and there was a known goal. But and in the Middlesbrough side that day was a certain Graham Souness, somebody may have heard of,
I think I might have been
out there, and also Phil Borsma and the rest of it. But Stevie played that day. But I think as we were talking about it, I think the other reason why I wouldn't say he was underrated, because he's not. He's very much appreciated. But I think he was alongside, not alongside, but it was Gordon Hill and Steve Coppell. They were the two rampaging, wingers that did everything. It was just like a breath of fresh air. They came up from the second division and they just flew at defenders. And I think because Gordon was, the cheeky Cockney with the personality. I'm not saying Steve didn't have a personality, but because Gordon Hill was I wouldn't say a fan's favourite, but the spectacular goals, whereas Steve Coppell was more of a workaholic. I remember I used to subscribe to a magazine called Shoot. I don't know whether everybody remembers that. And Gordon Hill used to write in that, although he told me it was ghostwritten recently, but never mind. But he described himself as he would beat a player with his skill, whereas Stevie Coppell would beat a player with his pace. Whether that's a realistic description, I don't know. But I do think that's probably Stevie. Should I say that Gordon Hill not overshadowed, but because of his personality, he was the personality of the day, whereas Stevie didn't quite have that same reputation. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I do think that is fair, and I think it is. It was just personalities at the time. I think Steve Coppell was a far more introvert thinker than Gordon was. I wouldn't disagree with that at all.
Did you like me go to the Barbers in 1976 and say you wanted a centre part in like Stevie
Funny
Coppell?
enough. Yeah. Yeah. I took a picture of Gordon Hill with me.
Yeah, there you go.
But I mean, when you sort of saw them two lined up against each other, there wasn't a lot of difference in their hairstyles at the time.
Good point. No, there wasn't. And then there was the famous. While we're talking about the two of them, we've got to talk about the old 1-2, the Gillette advert with Tommy Dog. Come here, Gordon. Come here, Stevie. It's the old 1-2. I can't do the Scottish accent, but
I've still got a Gillette razor that I bought at the time. And why did I buy a Gillette razor? Because Stevie Coppell and Gordon Hill telling us about the old 1-2.
There you go. Why did you buy New Balance boots? Because Robbo wore them.
I was never any good in them, mind.
Me neither. Still not really. But
do you think, Paul and Ian, that Steve really sort of the United fans really took him to heart because he embodied I don't say the Busby spirit, but the kind of the ethos of the attacking football that United were renowned for, flying wingers, etc., etc. Do you think that's why? You've got to include Gordon Hill in that conversation as well, and because they were a partnership after all.
Yeah.
And do you think that they're still talked about in such reverence these days because of the style of football that not only the Doc played with his teams, but when they got on the ball, the whole crowd was like, something's going to happen here. You always felt there's something special was going to happen when they got on the ball and when Stevie got on the ball as well. Would you say that's a fair assessment of the team?
I mean, for me, when that whole Doherty side, I mean, it was a swashbuckling side, and anybody that witnessed that at the time, people talk now and say, this is the worst team, and people moan and they're miserable and stuff. But people don't realise just what we came out of in the early 70s. You know, we had three Ballon d'Or winners that had really seen better. Well, Dennis's knees were going. Bobby was old, and George. Well, we all know George's problems.
George was George.
You know, and during 72, 73, 74, I mean, those were really poor times at United. You know, people go on about now we're finishing in Champions League spots and winning cups, and people are saying, "Oh, this is the worst team I've ever seen." And you know, we struggled big time in those early 70s, and then Doc brought that young side together, and it did catch the ethos of the Busby Babes because they were a young side. I can't remember what the average age, but it was only about 20, 23, something like that. I think there's been younger teams since, but yeah, and that and the swashbuckling wing play that you got from Hill and Coppell was just a joy to behold. And when you had a centre forward like Pancho who could play with his back to goal and Jimmy Greenoff just off him, I mean, it was a delight watching that little Lou just behind them.
Mikari, yeah. I don't think it was a tragedy they never actually won what would have been at the time the First Division Championship. Really, when you think about it, and they so nearly did after coming back from the Second Division, they nearly did it, didn't they? But just fell away at the end. But it's just a tragedy, really, that when you because we can all name that side, can't we? You know, the Jimmy Nichols, Stuart Houston, Brian Greenoff, Martin Bucket, go through the midfield. You know, Joey Daly. You know, and we all, everybody, even though we didn't win the First Division Championship, everybody, you know, of our age, absolutely love that era because of the FA Cup wins, of course, but just the way, because of the way, as you say, we played football, the swashbuckling style.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just a shame that when Dave Sexton came in, we lost that to a large degree. Although we got it back again under Ron, I think. And Stevie was still part of that. I think he set up a record, didn't he, Coppell, of consecutive appearances, an unbroken run.
I was going to make that point as well, that he still holds the record for the
I think it was the day we've signed Brian Robson. They put up a congratulations to him because I think that was something like the 200th game or something like that on the run.
Yeah, was it 207 in total before?
Yeah, because I think, funny enough, I think he actually lost his place to Brian Robson eventually. I think he was put out in the subs bench for a few games, and then I think a little bit further down the line, Sammy Mack was the one that was properly squeezed out as a result of that. It's funny when you think back to those times now. It was a team. It wasn't a squad, was it?
No, that's right.
So there wasn't
no. One sub.
If you lost your place in the team, that was it. You went somewhere else.
That's right. And basically, David McCreary could fit in on most of the positions. So if someone was off form or was injured, then he pretty much played anywhere, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think about it, though, chaps. 207 appearances doesn't sound a lot, but when you say there was 30, how many games in a season? 30.
It was 42 games back in those days. Wasn't it?
So that's what, 5, 6, 7 seasons more.
Yeah,
6
seasons. 6 seasons on the trot without, and under three different managers without being dropped.
That's such a testament to his adaptability from going from that forward, that attacking right winger that the Doherty team that Tommy Doherty played him and the fans loved him for, to that kind of slightly withdrawn role that Ron Atkinson and Dave Sexton were playing, but they still loved him and he still got in the team. Yeah, so not only had the skill and the tenacity to do what he did during the 70s and the flying 70s, but also managed to, as he got a bit older, adapt his style of play to still be, devastating, but still retain the favour of the manager as well. There's not many players that can play 3 different managers in 10 years, maybe? Yeah, arguably 10 years, and still retain his place and to play for such a long time in so many consecutive games is, testament to his fitness levels.
That record won't be broke. There's no way anybody's going to break that.
I think I saw an headline in the paper today. Rashford's complaining that that we shouldn't be playing pre-season friendlies because there's already too many games during the season and stuff like this. And as I say, you're talking in an era when it's a squad game. You're not going to play every game.
No.
Everybody says about Bruno being flogged to death this season because he played every game or whatever. But back in Coppell's day, he was doing that week in, week out, year in, year out, for season after season.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just thinking about the two wingers. Let me ask you both a question, right? Perhaps with a slight apology to Jesper Olsen and some other players that I haven't thought of yet. But it probably took us to 1993 before we had two wingers who we could speak about in the same terms. I'm talking about, Giggs and Kanchelskis, if you like. I can't think of anybody until 93 of that kind of era that came along that where we had the two of them who emulated the Hill and Coppell era.
No.
What do you think?
There wasn't. No, there wasn't. Not for me. There was no. But as I say, for me, I don't think we played with out and out wingers. Probably once Sexton got involved in the club. As I say, I think he converted Coppell more to a left-sided midfield. I keep saying left-sided. Sorry, a right-sided midfield player, and he got rid of Gordon Hill altogether. He brought in Mickey Thomas to replace Hill.
Yeah.
But Mickey, again, was more workmanlike. He wasn't as an explosive winger and didn't come out with the explosive stuff that Gordon Hill used to come out with.
But it's what Sexton wanted. As you hit the nail on the head. He liked the workmanlike players, so that's why he brought in Mickey Thomas, workmanlike. Stevie Coppell could easily, when he always worked his socks off anyway. I almost said balls then, but I didn't. But he could. So that's, you could tell that's what Sexton wanted, and that's what he got. Unfortunately, it led to his demise in the end, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember that run at the end of it. He had a 9. I think it was nine wins on the trot or something. Well, 9 wins out of 11. So I can't remember what the exact sequences were. And then got the sack. And he got the sack not because United were not achieving results. He got the sack because it was pragmatic, and they were the crowds were dropping. I think under Doherty, it was always up around 56, 57,000, and it was just starting to sort of touch around about 49,000, 50,000 under Sexton. And I think that the board obviously saw that they needed to bring in somebody that would be more attack-minded, and we got Big Ron.
And that fed quite well into Steve Coppell's abilities. That Ron wanted to play with that attacking flair that his West Bromwich Albion team was well known for, and what a team that was. So that actually fitted Steve Coppell nicely. So I just want to take you back a little bit further, just before Steve Coppell joined United. So he's a Liverpool fan, playing at Tranmere Rovers, and am I correct in saying that Tommy Doherty had a chat with Bill Shankly about Coppell, and he said, "You've got to sign this lad." So Doherty just goes, "Okay, I'm going to get him," and then they go and buy him from Tranmere.
I'm pretty sure I've heard a story in the past where Doherty sent Jimmy Murphy over to watch a Tranmere game to watch somebody else, and he came back saying, "You got to sign the winger." And I think that then the conversation was then had between Shankly and Doherty.
So we've got to thank a former Liverpool manager for.
But it's one of those funny things, because we seem to have been embroiled in hatred of Liverpool now for so many years.
Generations.
And we forget that back in the day, the old managers were like a fraternity. And one of Busby's best mates in football was Bill Shankly.
Yeah, he was.
I can't imagine Ten Hag and Jurgen Klopp being best mates nowadays.
You also remember that.
Go back to. Do you remember when we beat? I don't know whether anybody listening here didn't know that we beat Liverpool 2-1 in the 1977 FA Cup final. But then obviously when Doherty's shenanigans happened in the summer, and we went to the Charity Shield, as it was called then, where we were, and correct me, Paul, if I get this wrong, but I think I'm sure, I went to the game where we wore the lovely white strip with the 3 stripes, and we wore that against Liverpool. But prior to the game kicking off, picking up on your point, Paul English, a minute ago, when you were saying about the managers getting on, there was a double-decker bus that they drove around the outside of Wembley with Sir Matt, and I think it was Bill Shankly. It was either Bill Shankly or Bob Paisley.
It was a different Charity Shield.
Oh, was it? Okay.
It was the 1982 Charity Shield, and they had like a Pope-mobile.
Yeah. Oh, was it? Why did I think it was 76?
But it was Paisley and Busby.
Right. Oh, that's why it was 82 then. Because that was the game. Okay, so the 77 one was where Keegan was moved out and he was replaced by Dalglish. And I think that was Dalglish's debut for Liverpool against United. And we drew 0-0 and we shared the shield. Right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
You've also got to remember that Sir Matt was a former Liverpool captain back in the day, or player, way back when. So I put a tweet out this morning, you may well have seen it, chaps, about asking followers to give us their memories of Steve Coppell, and I just want to read a few of these out as I try to do every week. So the photo was the photo was Steve Coppell in the black shorts and the red shirt, wearing the classic Patrick's, putting a cross in as per usual. Ken Paul says his favourite memory is that very photo. He scored 2 almost identical goals in a 3-0 win at Main Road, and I'm sure we're going to mention the lob over Joe Corrigan at some point, which even when I watch it now, I'm like, how did you not end up breaking your ankles and snapping your legs on that surface? Paul Northwich Red says, great player, my favourite Liverpudlian, and I say that as he was very well educated. Brooksy tweeted a picture of his England versus Hungary ticket in November 1981. He said, first time at Wembley and my favourite player got butchered right in front of us. He never really got back to 100%. Such a shame. Another Paul WW66. What a player. How much would it be worth in today's market? Start at 100 million and keep going.
Yeah,
he met him in the club restaurant at Old Trafford in April 78, where he patiently signed autographs for everyone who wanted one. Stop pushing, lads. You'll all get one. Mike Pepperoni, best name. Great, love that. Superb player. My favourite when I first started going to games. Great at beating players and getting that spot-on cross in at the right moment. Mike, at 80s Culture fan, he's been a guest a couple of times. Always first on Ron Greenwood's England team sheet. Holds the record for the most consecutive games for United of 107, as we mentioned. Not only had the ability to beat a fullback, he could also cut inside and hammer one with his left foot. Rick Wilkinson says, best crosser of a ball I've seen at Old Trafford. That's a brave claim. We've had some, I suppose Beckham springs to mind, but but I suppose when you look at the pitches and the conditions and the physicality of the game back then, to be so consistent and getting those crosses in was just incredible. United since O'Farrell. It says, Pancho with Coppell on one wing, Hill on the other. I made hay. I met Steve in the Players' Lounge, early 80s, and I'm 6 foot tall. And as a photo was being taken with him, his words were, I'll have to stand on my tippy toes with you. He was that much of a joyful character. Leah says her love of Coppell is well known. He could run all day, cross the ball as good as anyone I've seen, including Bex. A goal threat and helped his fullback. I may be blind in my admiration for him, but it was always 8 or 9 out of 10. Trust me, Leah, you're not blind in your admiration for him. Thousands and thousands of United fans of a certain generation also would rate him 8 and 9 out of 10 probably every single game. Did you ever see him have a bad game? Did he ever have a bad game?
I think towards the end of his career, because you touched on there, and I still cringe because I remember that challenge on him by the.
Yeah, I was at Wembley that night because.
Were you really? Yeah.
I used to. It was one of those things. I had a little schoolmates. How did we stay in contact? Because we all supported different sides. We used to go watch England together. Something I gave up doing not long after that, to be honest with you.
Well, just remember, if you look back at that challenge, it's a horrendous challenge. It's right over the top, and that's what, and everything stemmed from that, didn't it? And he was never. I mean, it's awful to say it. It's a bit like Neil Webb. I remember Neil Webb getting injured for England, and he was he was never the same again. And
No.
a different player, different era, if you like. But I still, you know, I cringe when I see it, and I just think, if that hadn't have happened, how long would he have? You know, could he have continued? Would he have continued a lot longer?
Yeah. I think because he was that sort of consistent player. You could see him going on till he was 35, 36, probably still putting in the same sort of crosses and all. Reminded me a bit. We were talking about Ian Callaghan at Liverpool was that sort of player as well, a consistent player that, you know, and they kept him in the Liverpool squad for years and years and years and years. And I could have seen Coppell doing that without the injury. Absolutely.
And you make a really good point, because Nick Barber tweeted, but for the career-ending injury to Coppell and multiple bad injuries to Robbo, we'd have challenged for more than 2 FA Cups under Ron Atkinson. So he was, we bought him from Tranmere, paid 60,000 quid. I mean, that's one of the best £60,000 I'm sure United have ever spent. He doubled his salary, apparently. But he also went on to complete his degree while he was playing for United. And that's something you don't hear anymore of intellectual, very intellectual players that just because they've made it to a club like United, that they want to give up on their degrees and their studies. Because apparently it was an agreement with Doherty, was it, that he trains a couple of times a week, but on other nights he's allowed to go or other days going to complete his course. I mean, talk about dedication to what you want to do. Obviously, you know, I guess then, and I'll touch on the physicality side of it again, is the career potentially is quite short in that era of football. Looking at some, you know, talking about tackles, some of the tackles that you see then barely got a nudge from, you know, barely got an acknowledgement from the referee, whereas nowadays that's going to cause a riot. You know, it's just not going to be allowed. But to do that, shows incredible dedication, not just to his footballing career that he played at such a high level for such a long time, but also went and completed his bachelor's degree, if my memory serves me. Because was it economics or history or something along those sort of lines?
History of economics, I think it was.
Oh, okay. Oh, it was a bit of both. All right, fair enough. But he managed to complete his degree while he was playing on the right wing.
Yeah, the only other player I ever remember doing that was Alan Gowling.
Okay, so going back a little bit
when he first got into the squad at United in the 60s. I know one or two footballers that have done degrees since, you know, since they've retired, but not many do it at the same time.
Yeah, not training with their teammates as well. It's a big ask, isn't it? Just to say, oh, you know, where's Stevie? And then he goes in the first team on Saturday.
Yeah,
you know, it's like you've got to be a special player to kind of get away with that, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Gary Bailey was another one who went on to who continued to study, do an Open University or something like that, while he was playing for United. So Steve Coppell made his debut in March 1975 in a 4-0 win against Cardiff City. At the end of that season, with just 10 games and a single goal. But the following season, he played 39 games, scored 10, one of which was against Liverpool. And then he started to win honours for the England under 23 team. So, you know, he's come from Tranmere. How that never happens. Again, it's something that just doesn't happen anymore, where a Premier League club or let's talk First Division. Forget Premier League. Let's talk First Division. You know, go to a club lower down the rankings and pick someone out, and they become an absolute star. It's and you say it's the network. It's the network.
I think of that was of that ilk was Lee Sharp, who we bought from Torquay.
Torquay, yeah.
But there's been very, very few players since then that we've plucked. We've gone and given other lower league players chances at United, but not many of them have taken it, have they, over the years? So,
but he was always, I suppose, because he was an intelligent lad, that he was always going to be. He was always going to be sensible. He probably listened to the managers. He probably listened to tactics. A bit like that he used to say about Ollie. Ollie, when he was super sub, was always he'd be studying the defender and look for the weaknesses and come on and try and completely take them to the cleaners. And so I suppose, and it might be a little bit too early, Paul, that we're talking about his his managerial career, particularly as it wasn't at United. But he was always going to be, he's an intelligent lad. He was always going to be a candidate for a decent manager, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, he was the first manager I ever remember that actually sat and wrote notes. When he was sitting there with his little pad and a pen, and I thought, what's he doing? Because you think now, they've got people reciting on tablets and doing all sorts of bits and pieces nowadays.
Yeah.
But back in those days, you sat there, you chewed your gum, you chucked it out at the end of the game, and that was it. But Coppell was there all studiously, and I'd never seen that before. And you think we're only talking late 80s. When he was, I think it was 88 or something like that. He must have become manager of Palace. I'm not sure. I'm not.
Well, he was manager against us in the 1990 Cup final, so it sounds about right to me.
There a couple of years before that. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, you're talking about his managerial career just momentarily. Had a tweet from Richard Shaw, who played under Steve Coppell when he was manager at Palace. I think Shaw played sort of early mid-90s for Palace. What a guy. Gave me my debut. Great manager to have, finding my way in the game. And I know from a previous online conversation with him, he said that he was arguably the best player on the pitch during training as well, when just the technique and how he was. And that rubbed off a lot on the Palace players at the time. And that's why he's still a hugely popular figure at Palace as well. GDH says gets criminally overlooked when United's greatest number 7s are discussed, which we have already touched on, but I still figure out why that's weird, that he doesn't get the recognition as a number 7 that he really should be having as well. There are there are some, and I don't say less illustrious number 7s that have played for United over the years that still get mentioned, not quite in the same vein. But it's almost like he just gets missed off completely, and I just find that very, very, very weird. Phil Thomas.
I think it's down to personalities, Paul. Sorry, I mean just on that.
No, I think so.
I do because he was such a quiet, sort of quiet guy. So if you think of the George Best, say no more as a personality. You think of the Ronaldos and the Robbos, and I don't know. I think it's not because of his footballing ability or what he achieved for us and the way he played. I think it's more about the way he was as a person that didn't lend itself to the the big personality that's seen as one of the big number 7s. And don't get me wrong, I agree with you. He should be in that up there with them all, but I don't know whether that's the reason or not.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ian. And over the years, I collect badges. I've got a lot of badges. I've never seen, you see the badges with Coppell and Beckham and Best or whatever, all as the number 7s. You never see one with Coppell.
Yeah, it's
strange.
Come on, United, sort it out. Let's have some Coppell love.
Yeah.
Phil Thomas says Steve Coppell is my football hero. Every player on my we're going back now. Every player on my Subbuteo pitch. I said it. Bar the keeper was Steve Coppell. I played in the wing and I wore 7. He's also the reason I support United. I'm not a local and I should be a hammer, but I supported United to watch Steve Coppell. And guys, I'm sure we've heard it many, many times that you're not from Manchester, you should support your own team. But that's topic for something. For another,
let's just do that another week.
Entirely. We will do that because we could sit here for more than an hour. I used to get it a lot as a kid, but then Liverpool winning all and sundry when
I'm still getting it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I occasionally get these. Well, why do you support them? And I try not to go into too much. No. So he played in the 1976 Cup final, which let's just kind of glaze over that.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. It was,
and it was one of those. I was at both cup finals, 76 and 77.
Even
Johnny, was really fortunate to get a ticket for both. I mean, I didn't get a ticket because I was going to loads of games at that time. I was lucky if I saw 12 or 15 games in 76-7. I can't remember how many it was. It certainly wasn't enough to qualify for a cup final ticket. 76, I got a cup final ticket the night before the game because my mate's sister was going out with, amazingly, a Palace apprentice, and he got me a ticket.
Wow. I didn't go to 76 or 77. I'm afraid my first cup final was 79, which obviously was which had its also had its sadness. But 83, yeah, we sort of started going from there, and I don't miss too many from there.
Yeah.
And the following year, which, let's be honest, we don't really talk about it that often. The 1977 Cup final, he was one of 9 United players that survived from the year previously, but so he did get a winner's medal. Didn't he also get one in 83 as well? If I'm
Yes.
correct, wasn't he?
No, it was just before 83 that his knee finally started playing up, and we ended up trying to choose between Ashley Grimes, Laurie Cunningham, and Alan Davis to fill the void. And Alan Davis played.
He did in 83. He started, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think before we even start talking about the 77 Cup final, we have to talk about probably the most, Stevie might not have the most flamboyant personality, but he probably won the prize for the best banner in the Cup final, which was the Coppell topple to Hill and Coppell.
Great banner.
So, that's... was it Buck? Oh, what was the one? Buchan does 70 miles an hour on the highway.
Highway, yeah.
There's some brilliant ones, but the Coppell topple was pretty special. Whoever did that, if they're out there, we take our hat off.
Some strikes faster than Leyland or something.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. You don't get better. Well, you're not allowed them anymore, are you?
No.
Jesus saves, but Pearson nets the rebound.
Rebound, yeah. Andrew Neild on Twitter says on his debut when he came on as sub for Willie Morgan, the old single line electronic scoreboard in J-Stand spelled his name wrong. It read Koppel, like Frank. I'm sure it was a 4-0 win versus Cardiff. Might be wrong about the game, but not about the scoreboard. So many great memories of this is Tony Mullis. So many great memories of Steve Coppell. Never forget him scoring 2 great goals against City at Main Road in a league game. United won 3-0 as well. Steve Hartley says, my old boss was a Cockney Wimbledon season ticket holder, was at Liverpool University with him. Economics course, played footy with him there, said he was easily the best player around, destined for a pro career. And something I touched on earlier was he scored a lot of great goals for United, some absolute net busters. But I guess the one that really certainly sticks in my mind when I watch it is the goal against City on that pitch that looked like a skating rink, and from an almost not an impossible angle, but he seemed to angle his body at such a ridiculous angle just to side foot it over the top of Joe Corrigan. I mean, in terms of his favourite goals, Johnny, favourite Stevie Coppell goal. I mean, that one just always sticks in the mind because of how almost impossible it seemed to do, and it looked like he was going to snap his legs at any second. It was just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, when I first started watching United, it was probably towards maybe the end of Stevie Coppell's career, but I remember him. For me, he was just the goal against City, as you quite rightly say, brilliant. But the thing that sticks out for me about Stevie Coppell is how direct he was as a winger. He beat his man. He didn't have any of this beat players 2 or 3 times. He'd beat his man. He'd get to the byline. He'd play the ball in, whether it was either Stuart Pearson or later times. I think I'm right in saying he played when Joe Jordan was there as well, didn't he? Fantastic. Him and Gordon Hill on the other side. I mean, for me, Manchester United have always been about wingers, great wing play. We've been lucky to see a lot of great wing play, maybe not over the last 13 years, but before then we have. And that's what I miss. And Stevie Coppell was a silent assassin for me, quiet off the field, but brilliant on the field. A lovely fella. I got to meet him. Lovely guy. He actually had, believe it or not, I'm from Salford in near the Cliff, the training ground, and he had a share in a local hairdresser's in Salford, and he's a really lovely fella, really nice guy.
He was a cut above, wasn't he?
He was a cut above, yeah, cut above, definitely, yeah. You've got it.
Nice.
Brilliant player, and as I say, for me, I love old-fashioned wingers. All he wanted to do was get to that byline, beat his man, and get the ball into the middle. And you might say, well, what people like, they get off the seats when they see people beat players 3 or 4 times. That wasn't what Coppell was about. Beat his man, get the cross in, and often there was a goal at the end of it. And I love watching him. I love watching Gordon Hill as well, by the way, on the other side, and the wing playing. And that's what, for me at the moment, United are missing. Those out-and-out wingers that get you off your seats. I don't see it at the moment. Maybe Garnacho coming through.
He's the nearest we've got.
Yeah.
We've got Anthony. We've got Anthony who sort of gets there and then stops and then wants to come inside and every time and but I think obviously we trust the manager because we do. But as you say, Garnacho, he looks the real deal, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He does, Ian. And the thing is about just going back to Stevie Coppell. When do you remember him going backwards with a ball? Yeah, exactly. Every time he got the ball, all he wanted to do was beat his man. And as a Manchester United fan, that's what we pay to see. We want to see attacking football. I don't mind if United.
Absolutely. And you think as a defender, right? If you've got Stevie Coppell, running down your neck, it'd be the last thing on earth that you'd want because he's so positive. He must be an awful player to mark for those reasons that you just.
Oh, he would have been a nightmare to mark.
Yeah.
Low center of gravity, quick. The things that you wouldn't want as a defender, as a fullback, you wouldn't want to be up against him. You're absolutely right.
But he wasn't physically imposing, was he? But it was that I'd hate to have had someone like him bearing down on me and thinking, if he knocks it past me, I'm dead meat. He's gone. He's out of there. He must have been an absolute, mind you, both sides must have been an absolute nightmare for fullbacks when they were on their game. And you had, Stuart Pearson and the Greenoffs lurking around on the 6-yard box, knowing that it's going to come in from somewhere. And Joe Jordan as well. He must have been a centre forward's dream to have in the side, knowing that if he gets it out, I know what he's going to do. He's going to beat the man. I'm going to get there. I'm going to anticipate what he's going to do. Back when I played football, I was a fullback. I was a left back, centre back, right back, played pretty much everywhere. And I used to hate playing against. You think, the little ones, I'll have him. But sometimes I'll be untying my veins. I'm just tied up in knots simply because they were just so quick. And and watching, when you watch the YouTube highlights, and you can hear the crowd get it. The crescendo starts to rise because they know that something is about to happen on either side. And and
it wasn't kick and rush, was it? When you think about it, that Wimbledon side got a lot of stick for being kick and rush. Some of it mostly justified, but when you think about it, wasn't just he was a very pacey player, but it wasn't a case of just belt the ball over the top. He had a lot more than that. He had a lot of skill in terms of turning his defender, maybe using his pace, yes, but he was. Maybe not as much skill as Gordon, but then again, Gordon couldn't do things that Stevie could. So that was the brilliant thing with the two of them, isn't it?
I think just to add to that point, I think you raised it, Paul, before. Think of the pitches these boys played on as well.
Exactly.
If you put Stevie Coppell on a pitch that we've got now, or the pitches in the Premier League, he'd terrorise fullbacks even more. Because he had that movement, didn't he, with his hips, where he'd go one way, the defender would go that way, and he's gone the other. I think he's a brilliant player. The number 7 shirt at Manchester United is a special shirt. We'll all agree on that. And Stevie Coppell, he absolutely deserves to be on that list with the likes of Cantona, Ronaldo, Beckham. Keep going. Georgie Best, of course, but keep that name going. And Stevie Coppell, absolutely, for me, deserves to be right in the mix on that list because that's how important he was to our football club.
Yeah,
one of the things we were touching on there is about his intelligence and getting his degree and stuff, but he was also an intelligent footballer, and that's sometimes when you look at somebody like Anthony now, and Anthony's got the skill to do this, that, or the other, but what happens in his head? That's the thing. I always used to think that about Nani. I used to think that if Nani was a bit more intelligent as a footballer, because he had all the physical attributes to do things, but he often would pick the wrong pass or cut inside when he should have been cutting on the outside and stuff like that. And I always think Steve Coppell, more often than not, got that right.
I think it's a great point. I think he got he got a degree from Liverpool Uni, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was a smart guy. And as you say, as a centre forward, whether you're Stuart Pearson, whether you're Joe Jordan, whether you're Jimmy Greenoff, you want that ball played to that penalty spot. And he did that. He did it time and time again. It's like in later times for me, in terms of wingers linking up with centre forwards, the best that I've seen at United, we've had a lot of fantastic players, haven't we? We've been very lucky. But the way Beckham used to link up with Ruud van Nistelrooy, Beckham didn't have the pace to beat his man, but his link-up play and his crossing ability to find Van Nistelrooy, second to none.
Yeah, I mean, Beckham's special in as much as he's the only winger I've ever known that constantly put in crosses but never ever got to the byline.
Correct, because he didn't have the pace to beat his man.
Couldn't do it.
But his delivery was probably the best. There won't be any better.
No.
I mean, arguably, and in lots of conversations we have on the social platforms, Stevie Coppell and Gordon Hill are widely regarded as the two best wingers that United have had, arguably in history. And if you want to go back even further to the Busby teams with like David Pegg and Johnny Berry and all these sort of players, to say
Johnny Aston.
Johnny Aston, obviously, who was an absolute superb player for United in the mid late 60s. It's to have that distinction of best wingers we ever saw, and we all want to see attacking football. We want to see exciting football. And would it be an understatement? It probably is an understatement. And as soon as I say that the likes, so Coppell and Hill added an extra dimension to Tommy Dock's team. Would you say that without those two, if we had a very solid spine, so you had Alex Stepney, Martin Buchan, and you had Sammy Mack, and you had Stuart Pearson, and then to add a Gordon Hill on the left and a Steve Coppell on the right with everything that they brought to the game, would you say that was the difference to United being a good side in the 70s or being the cavalier, and you mentioned earlier, Paul, swashbuckling team?
Yeah, I absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think from the moment Gordon Hill joined, we went on another level, because you remember we'd only just come up out of the second division. Stevie had only played a dozen games or something before we hit the first division, and I can't remember, Gordon signed in something like the October of '75, I think, October or November. So it still took those few weeks, but by the time we got to Wembley in '76, so at the end of that season, everybody knew Hill and Coppell. Everybody in football knew who they were.
I think we took them by surprise, didn't we? Did you not think? Yeah. Because we come up from the second division, and nobody was expecting, the old-fashioned winger to for them. Well, nobody was expecting them, and B, they weren't expecting them to be as good as they were.
Well, not many teams were playing with two wingers back then.
Right.
I think Liverpool would play with one, either Highway or Callaghan or whoever, but I don't think they would play two wingers. There weren't many teams playing two wingers, and there was still the hangover from the '66 World Cup where you had the wingless wonders. There was an awful lot of teams that maybe had a out and out winger, but there weren't many that had two, and certainly not two as good as Hill and Coppell.
No.
Proper entertainers, and I think that's what we've, as Man United fans, that's what we want to see. Going back to the Busby Babes, you want players that, as I said before, get yourself off your seat, or obviously in the terraces in those days. But those two were brilliant, and I love Gordon Hill as well. What a player! What a player! Again, I mean, I was 75. You're talking about, I was only 7 then. So it was a little bit before my time, but again, watching those players, and I think one of the memories you guys will know better than me, but was it the semi-final of the FA Cup against, was it Derby County, when Hill scored
the
free kick and the volley?
That was it.
Free kick.
Well, funny enough, Paul was asking about favourite goals, and mine of Coppell was the following semi-final against Leeds.
Yeah. Brilliant.
He scored some absolute net busters.
He did.
But he almost didn't. It didn't look as if he was putting a lot into it. But it was just. But the technique. And again, we can go back and talk about the football that obviously we grew up watching was was that very physical, very hard man. The pitches were someone like, you know, a lot of them were. Look at the Old Trafford pitch in the 80s, and you all remember this with the sand all the way down the middle of it, and you don't get that. But to score some of the goals that he scored and to do what he did in those conditions, and I think was it you, Ian, made the point about if you put him on a Premier League pitch, or was it you, Jonny, made the point, put him on a Premier League pitch, he'll terrorise people because he'll be a 150, 200 million pound player without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
But to do what he did and do it consistently for 207 consecutive games in that era when there was no diving around. If you got chopped down, you got back up again, all of that kind of stuff. It's just an incredible testament, I think, to his athleticism, his consistency, his fitness, his whole attitude towards the game of football as well. And I think he's
manager's dreams, Paul. Absolutely, manager's 100%. Dream. Could you? It'd be the first person you put on the team sheet. You tell Gordon, as we all love Gordon. Tell Gordon Hill to come back and defend if we're under the cosh. He just look at you as if to say, "Well, no, I'm hanging up for the next goal." Tell Stevie Coppell to come back and defend if you're under the cosh. Okay, boss, I'll do it.
Exactly.
And he do it well.
Yeah, I want to read some comments I got from Facebook earlier on. And I put a similar post out there about tonight's episode. So Wendy Hamilton, she went to a nightclub with him and Andy Ritchie. They went to Sands of Stretford, and it continues. And I was like, I want to know what can happen here. He'd won Young Player of the Year. She was in the executive suite at Old Trafford. He asked her out. So obviously I went. He put his jacket around me because that was their policy. That's great. Thank you, Wendy. Obviously Hamilton is your married name and not your maiden name. Ian Gregory said, very much an unsung hero of our number 7 shirt, which we've spoken about a number of times. Stevie Coppell was a class winger, disciplined, got on with his job, no fuss, no glamour. All Reds of the 70s and 80s appreciated this guy so much. Nick Nicolau said, good winger, fast, direct, and could cross the ball and score. Steve Norris, my first United hero, doesn't seem to get the credit he deserves when we talk about the legends of our number 7 shirt. It's a recurring theme going on here. And Steve Malloy says, awesome player, proper hard working number 7, very underrated by the Abu fan clubs. But as we, I think and I don't want to be disparaging to modern day football fans, but I think football fans of maybe the 70s and 80s appreciated an opposition player in terms of what they brought to the team more so than maybe they do nowadays. I could be completely off the mark there, and I might get some absolute pelters saying I'm talking out my backside. But would you say that's fair, or was it just an appreciation of good football?
You always had your pantomime villains back in those days.
Yes.
I don't know.
I think if we, as a United fan, if you saw Frank Worthington scoring that goal on Match of the Day, where he did the pirouette and stuck it in, we all admired that, didn't we? So I think Paul, you're right to a certain degree, but there was still a lot of tribal stuff around.
Yeah.
I think what you didn't have them, and that's the social media. People, a lot of the United fans, of traditional United fans, dare I say, of our age, get a little bit peed off when these sort of people that just sit at home and just want to text, announce Qatar or spend 200 million on Neymar or something, and you'd say to them, and they wouldn't even know who Gordon Hill was or Stevie Coppell was, and that's the frustrating thing. But as you say, you have to be mindful of, shall we say, the modern day fan.
Yeah, it's different from our day when you went to a football match when I first started going to football matches. You went to a football match because you just wanted to be part of that atmosphere and seeing something live. Got to remember, we hardly saw United on TV. You were lucky if you saw them maybe once or twice a month, highlights on Match of the Day or the big match or whichever Sunday program you got. But there was something about just being at a football game in those days that isn't there anymore. It's not the same. I can't explain it.
You're right.
You're right. Listen, you're absolutely right, Paul. Sorry, I'm going over. Just quickly. I mean, I think I'm in the lovely thing about social media now is having WhatsApp groups, and we've got we've got a WhatsApp group of a load of us started by a guy called David Nixon, and he and everybody is our age, and we mostly anyway, we tend to say the things that we're talking about now. So during games we have like-minded stuff going on. I don't know whether you guys have a similar thing where you know, with pals that you speak the same language to, and I think that's, you know, I don't know. There's something great about that in saying that we're all in the same boat, if you like, because outside of that boat, it is a lot different when you're going to the ground or you're in a pub or whatever.
Sorry, I just think as well, just to add to that point as well, you know, I always remember going as a kid and, you know, paying whatever it was, 80 pence to stand on the scoreboard paddock, you know, and you paid on the gates and you got carried in and you got the bus back afterwards, and I was, you know, 7 or 8 years of age or whatever, and you got carried up and you're with all your mates, and I don't know, it was raw. It was raw rather than it's a little bit more. There's so much money in the game now. Don't get me wrong, I still think it's a fabulous product. But as you were saying there, Ian, you know, we didn't necessarily win a lot, did we, going back to those days? But we wanted to be part of it because the atmosphere was fantastic. Whether you're in the Stretford end, you know, I used to stand in the scoreboard paddock. Fantastic. I loved it being in there, you know, with all the bus conductors, we're all there, you know, I remember it even as a kid. You know, they'd all come straight after work, and it was very much that's what Manchester United is, a working man's club, and it always has been, you know, sit on the docks. And we missed that now. We missed that, but we've had it, and I think we should feel lucky because we have been blessed to watch that. And I met Stuart Pearson a few years ago, and I was fortunate. I worked for a company that had a box at Old Trafford, and I took my son, and I met Stuart. What a guy! What a guy! Just there's no airs of graces on these players. These are for us. These are Stuart Pearson for you guys. He's probably one of your ultimate heroes, Pancho. What a player. But such a nice guy. And I don't know if you get as much of that these days. I don't know whether you guys agree, but that's just my view on it. You know, these are proper down to earth.
We were touching on that earlier about, you know.
Sorry for being late, by the way, guys. Sorry about that.
Back in the day, you could go and have a drink with the players after a game. And I was saying, even in the 90s, I could still go to supporters club dues, and we'd speak with Robbo and Pally and Brucey and say, "Where are you going afterwards?"
Or Paddy Crowan's pub.
Well, we used to go to Discotheque Royales.
Oh,
we'll be upstairs in the top bar sort of thing, and you'd go in there. That sort of thing doesn't happen now. Well, I don't think they even do supporters club dues anymore, do they?
But you see, but then again, Paul, you think about it, right? In those days, they got the respect. So if you were in a pub with them, you know, you wouldn't take the mickey or say stuff. You know, if that happened now, if players were in a pub or so, you know, there'll be somebody wanted to pick a fight with them, or there'd be somebody wanted to.
Oh yeah,
you know,
because as we were saying earlier, the fan base has changed.
It's changed, exactly.
Guys, I want to ask you an if, buts and maybes question about Steve Coppell. He retired at 28 years old. I mean, that is criminal in itself, but because obviously his knee completely gone. And apparently he's got no ACL left at all now. He's got no cartilage in his leg at all. Had he stayed fit and he continued to play, so 28 years old in 1983, so he arguably could have played under Sir Alex as well, and been, you know, played under 4 managers. Do you feel that a fit Steve Coppell could have been the difference between United finishing second in the First Division and United winning the league in the First Division? Big question. Obviously, we'll never know the answer to it. But in your opinion, do you feel that he could have been the missing part, perhaps?
He certainly could have been the link. He could, if you think about Tommy Duck's side, and perhaps we did make the appointment of Dave Sexton wasn't quite right at the time and didn't carry on the good work. So he could have been the link, if you like. But then so could have Gordon Hill. You know, if Gordon Hill hadn't been sold, I'm not laying the blame at Dave Sexton completely. But again, as we said earlier, he wasn't his sort of player, so he got rid of Gordon Hill. So you might be right. Yeah, I mean, if he'd have stayed fit, he'd certainly probably wouldn't have played as many games as Giggsy, but he would have played. He wouldn't have been too far behind. And who knows? You know, he could have been there as a great dressing room influence as well to to push that forward?
And I'd say just to add to that
Jonny?
as well,
Yeah.
Paul, not just for the club as well, for country. He'd have played a lot more for England as well. Because he was, when he was playing for England, he put in some good performances. I'm not sure what the stats were on how many appearances he had for England, but I remember certainly a few games he played for him where he was outstanding. And as you say, just that longevity in 28 these days is your prime of your career. Your prime.
Yeah.
So to have another 2 or 3 years on top of that, with a player.
I still don't know that we would have gone on to win a league. I just think the Liverpool side at that time was just so strong.
I agree.
I always felt, in 85-6 when we started with the 10 wins, why didn't we win the league that year? It's because we got injuries and our squad was too thin. I think we lost Robbo and Strachan to sort of not long-term injuries, but they were out for a considerable while. I think they both dislocated shoulders, didn't they? I think
they did. Yeah, Robbo did, didn't he? Pretty.
Yeah, and I just felt all the way through that period we were more than one player short.
Quick story for you. Those first 8 games, I was being a Southerner. I was at the Hammersmith Odeon to see Gary Moore, who Thin Lizzy had just broken up, and Gary Moore and Phil Lynott had a single called Out in the Fields, and every night, because Phil wanted to carry on playing, he'd come on stage and play with him. Phil Lynott, as you probably know, was a massive Manchester United fan, and there's a lovely picture somewhere of Phil Lynott with Stevie Coppell.
With Steve Coppell, there is, indeed,
and I think he's got his England shirt, or he's got a United shirt on. That's it, one of Stevie's maybe. Anyway, I'm standing there in this pub. There's a real sort of rough pub next door to Hammy Odeon, and I'm standing there rather than go and watch the support band. And Phil Lynnott's in there. No one's talking to him at all. And he's just on his own. But you can't mistake him. And I wandered up to him. I didn't say anything about music. I talked about football, and I went up to him. I said, "Phil, I know you're a big Manchester United fan." And he leant into me because he was swaying a bit at the time. I think he'd had a few, even though he was on stage about 2 hours later. And he said to me, "I've had a walk-on bet." He said, United, because we'd won, by the way, we'd won those first 8 games or whatever it was, right? So he said, "I've had a bet." He said, "Manchester United are going to win every game this season." Oh, dear. I mean, it's those, and you think if only you'd had a phone in those days.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
take
exactly.
a photograph of that. But I swear to you, that's what he said. And I sort of somebody else then came over to talk to him, and I walked away. And sadly, I think within a year he'd passed away. But he was a big Manchester United fan. And there is that picture of him and Stevie Coppell.
Yeah,
there is.
Yeah, it's one of the ones I've had colorized.
Very iconic.
Yeah.
Yes. Keep doing it, Paul, as well. I do love those colorized photos. Credit to Andy, of course. The photo doctor, but brilliant. Yeah, I love seeing those old ones come to life, and it really gives a personality to those photos as well. I think they're brilliant. Chaps, we have got to wind it up very, very shortly, but I wanted to each of you just to give a summary of, in your own opinion, own words, of Steve Coppell. Ian.
Reliable, swashbuckling, lovely guy, United number 7 legend.
Paul.
For me, consistency at number 7. Absolute consistency over an 8 or 9 season period. And as we say, it's criminal that he's not thought of as one of the great 7s at Old Trafford.
But we'll continue to try to talk about him in the same vein as the Robbos and the Morgans and the rest of them. And Jonny?
Fantastic guy. On the pitch, off the pitch. Is he a legend, a number 7 legend for Manchester United? You bet he is. Stevie Coppell, one of the greatest for me. Always will be. Fantastic.
Cool. And the very last question to all of you. Does he make an all-time United 11? In his position. Sorry, not put you on the spot or anything.
No.
Saying no is fine. It's absolutely fine. It's not.
He's on the bench. He's on the bench.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not for me, but I think you raised a brilliant point before about 28. You know, his career finishing at 28. If we'd have carried on, and I'm not saying we would have necessarily won the league, but that longevity, maybe that would have changed it. But look, we've been very lucky to see some fantastic world-class footballers. But Stevie Coppell, he's right up there. He's right up there. And as we mentioned before as well about the pitches that he played on, in those pitches, the pitches that he played on, he was outstanding, absolutely outstanding footballer.
And that's a fantastic way to end. So Steve Coppell, United number 7 legend. That's it, right? We established that, and it's brilliant. Thank you so much indeed, guys, for jumping on this evening. I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you, Ian, in your very professional-looking studio you have there, with some cracking shirts and other bits and pieces in the background there.
It was called the Treble Bar before the unfortunate events of recent weeks, so it's now called the original Treble Bar.
Okay, nice. Mr. English, thank you so much indeed, sir, and keep doing what you're doing with your memorabilia and your badges and your shirts. I've never seen so many United shirts in one photo in my entire life. It's absolutely amazing. It's like a little cavern. You've got like a museum, and it's fantastic to look at. And Jonny, I know you were on a training course earlier on, but I really, really appreciate you jumping on for the last half an hour or so. Gents, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this evening. Thank you so much. This has been the United Before Fergie podcast. If you're watching this on the repeat, hi, do all your bits and pieces, your likes, your shares, your comments. If you listen to this on the audio podcast, do all that good stuff as well. And I will see you probably next week for another United Before Fergie podcast. Until that time, take care of yourselves. Have a good week, and goodbye, everyone.